Thank you. Thank you. Hey. Normally I always say thank you, both of you, but that doesn't apply here. My goodness. First of all, I want to thank you for sticking to your guns. I understand they tried to palm off Ken Ham on you instead of me. And you said, Dave or nothing, and that's good. Just don't let them... Just kidding, just kidding. Well, this is the organization I represent, Answers in Genesis. How many have been to the museum? I've talked to a few people. I'm sure if you just see who has been there, they would recommend a trip to Kentucky to see our museum. It is a 2-day affair if you're driving, 12 hours of driving, but the flight is a little faster, and you can get a direct flight from here right into Cincinnati, and once you're in Cincinnati at the airport, you're 5 miles from the museum, right on the interstate. So we hope to see you all out there. Well, I traveled about the country speaking a little bit. I retired in the year 2000 and started working on a part-time basis with Answers in Genesis, speaking all over the country. And then just a year ago, January 1st, I went full-time. So sold my house in St. Louis. I got $1.98 out of it. And of course, it had some acreage. And I bought a house in Kentucky, and so I'm a genuine Kentuckian. And I haven't learned how to speak Kentucky yet, but I'm working on it. Well, let's get into this talk. Everybody's interested in the origin of man. I mean, not too many people are interested in the origin of snails or cockroaches or moths or whatever. But when people talk about the origin of man, it draws some attention. And I think it's the whole idea of human evolution that probably sticks in the craw of Christians and creationists more than anything else. And I thought I would kind of get you in the mood for the talk this evening by showing you an exhibit that's been going on in London. It's called the Human Exhibit. You can go to the local zoo, the London Zoo, and there they have college students who've agreed to be the animals in the zoo. And so you go through and you can see them. You're not supposed to feed them, but you can... You can see them in the cage there, and people have really sort of been titillated by this. This zoo visitor said, it's hilarious. It turns everything upside down. It makes you think about humans in relation to the animals. Somebody else going through the zoo said, seeing people in a different environment among other animals teaches members of the public that the human is just another primate. Someone else going through said, a lot of people think humans are above other animals. When they see humans as animals here, it kind of reminds us we're not that special. Isn't that encouraging? I mean, you go to the zoo. Well, I put this talk together some years ago. It's called Lucy, She's No Lady. For starters, it's probably a male. And things kind of go down the hill from there. But we're going to have a critical examination of Australopithecus afarensis. Now you might wonder, why are we picking on this particular ape man? Well, there are a lot of ape men, as you know, or creatures believed to be ape men, and I believe they can all be fairly easily, wherever there's enough evidence to look at, be distinguished as either human or ape. I don't believe God made any ape men. But this is the one that's caught the public attention more than any other ape man. And this is the one I think that really impresses scientists most. So if we can critically evaluate this specimen, or this general type of specimen, Australopithecus afarensis, we can use pretty much the same sort of a critique or approach to critically evaluate the other so-called hominid ancestors. Lucy's so important that she's actually left her home country and has moved for 6 years to the United States, where over the next 6 years she will be on display at 10 museums. And for $25 to $30 a pop, you too can go and venerate some ape bones. Right now, Lucy's at the Houston Museum of Natural History. She'll be there for quite a while. The exhibit is called Lucy's Legacy, The Hidden Treasures of Ethiopia, which is where the specimen was found. This is what it looks like. We have a replica of this in our museum in Kentucky. It's about a 40% complete skeleton of a creature very much like a pygmy chimp, although you don't want to say that around them. They get offended. But you might be interested in just getting on the internet and looking at the Houston Museum. You'll see they're making a lot of hoopla about this. This is one of the screens you see. With regard to Lucy, they ask, how do you relate? I would have thought a better question would be, do you relate? But no, how do you relate? Notice the question's loaded. Another question they raise is, her story is your story. So in other words, if you see Lucy, look into her, you're really looking into your own background and history. She is being accompanied, or he as the case may be, to our country by a representative from Ethiopia, from the National Museum there. I won't try to pronounce the name, I'll probably get it all wrong, but here she is. And she's apparently going to be over here during the time the specimen's in our country. And she obviously is very close to this specimen. She says, I have an emotional thing with her. I have trouble thinking of her as a fossil sometimes. I sometimes consider her as a human being that has life in her. Well, it takes a fair amount of imagination from a rather beat-up monkey skeleton that's 40% complete. But a lot of people have visited the exhibit so far, and they consider it, at least the ones that have blogs that I've read, well worth the money spent. Even a lot of atheists are having genuinely religious experiences, just contemplating the skeleton of this particular ape. For example, this gentleman has a blog site that I looked in on, and he said, I stood and stared at her. This is the Lucy specimen. I stood and stared at her for as long as my family would let me. Can't you just see the family? Come on, they're monkey bones, come on. I had butterflies in my stomach the whole time to look down at that little 3-foot, 8-inch skeleton, knowing how long ago she lived and how closely related we are to her. No words can do justice to the feeling you get. So he definitely got his $25 worth. The interesting thing